All right. Thank you all for being here today. We are going to call to order. I know, and I gave him an extra 2 minutes. I said he's holding court back there.
Talk to the women then.
I know. I watched it.
This is the troubled corner here.
And let me move.
Listen, there'll probably be a special resolution at the next meeting because of that. So, but we'll call to order our September 17th meeting of the Transportation Policy Board. At this time, looking for a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any comments, changes, additions, deletions, anything on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed. Next up on our agenda is public comments. Anyone wishing to address the board this morning? Seeing none, we'll move to our action items. Let's get it on the floor first. Resolution TBV 2025-013. Do I have a motion to get on the floor? Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second. So next up, we need to hold a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on this item that's been duly placed on the floor? All right, seeing none from the public, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel to share about this resolution.
All right, well, I'll be doing the TIP amendments for this TPB. As always, we bring up reminders of what the TIP is about. It is a short-range work program, fiscally constrained, that covers a 4-year span, listing all of our regionally significant federally funded transportation projects in the MPO area. It is consistent with the regional transportation plan, the 25-year plan. It's fiscally constrained. This current TIP was adopted in November of 2022 and accounts for approximately $2.5 billion through fiscal year 2026. And as always, you can go to the TIP page, which is gnrc.org/TIP to look at active projects and the proposed amendments. This is kind of a new slide we're putting up here, just a little dissection of what the current program revenue comes from. Again, these are just regionally significant or federally funded projects. $2.5 billion. FHWA provides about 55% of that. 10% of that comes from FTA grants. The state revenue is about 19%, and local revenue is about 16%. So kind of diving into that a little bit as we're going through our RTP and TIP updates as well. So our amendments this cycle, the first three, we have 7 today, I believe. The first 3 are proposed to the board as requested by Mount Juliet. The first 2 are scope revisions and do not involve changing funding amounts. The third project is a funding addition request. The first one is Mount Juliet East Division Street widening project. Mount Juliet is requesting that the scope be revised from a 4-lane divided highway cross-section with a median to a 5-lane cross-section. The project will retain the scope for shoulders, traversable side slopes, and modal features. The second project, and Michael is keeping the map visible there for the projects. We're going to try to start doing that again. The second project is the Pleasant Grove widening, and again, a scope revision. It was previously envisioned to be a 4-lane median divided highway, and the revision is being requested to move it to a 3-lane roadway. The description also adds language to specify 2 roundabouts along the corridor and a realignment to correct horizontal curve deficiencies. The third project is Mount Juliet Road ADA upgrades. This is the addition of funds that Mount Juliet is requesting the board to add around $355,000 in local funding to the TIP to leverage Federal Highway Surface Transportation Block Grant funds and complete this project. The project's ready for construction, and the additional local funding will cover cost overruns. The next 2 amendments are supporting our Murray County partners, the first in Spring Hill and the second in Columbia. The Spring Hill Amendment is the Peter Jenkins Greenway scope revision. This is requesting the board to approve a scope revision to reduce the length by moving the southern terminus to connect to the existing multi-use trail along Duplex Road. The funding for this is leveraged with the statewide transportation alternatives program made available to TDOT by the FHWA, and TDOT has reviewed and agreed with this change. The Columbia Amendment, Nashville Highway intersection improvements, is requesting the board to program an additional $883,000 approximately of Federal Highway Administration Surface Transportation Block Grant funds that are allocated to be used by the city. In addition to an additional $2.3 million of SDBG and about $807,000 of state matching funds to account for the revised project costs. The final two amendments are requested and sponsored by GNRC. They're paired together from our programmatic and grouping pages. GNRC has a regional call for what we call the Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities, MSID for short. This is a lot of on-demand ride services that provide hospital visits, things like that. We elected to cover the full amount of requests from the applications, and to cover that full amount, we're requesting to shift funding from our transit and technology program, which is allocated for similar purposes. So the first of that pair of amendments is shifting funds from the Regional Transit and Technology Program, requesting the board shift $879,000 of fiscal year 2024 from that Surface Transportation Block Grant set aside dedicated to the Transit and Technology Program to the MSID program to fulfill the demands of applications for that. It also consolidates various fiscal year lines into FY 2026 for each funding source for clarity in the TIP moving forward. The second of that pair of amendments, and our last amendment for today, is the Enhanced Mobility of Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities grouping, MSID. And this is the pair amendment here that adds that $879,000 to the MSID grouping for a FY 2026 implementation phase from the Transit Technology Program. And you'll see on the funding that it includes a state match that has been calculated at various levels for capital and operations for what the applicants and recipients of the award applied for. That I can turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, any questions for Daniel over those TIP amendments? Any questions or discussion on our resolution TBB 2025-013? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed. Next up, we're looking for an endorsement for the project prioritization framework for the major update to the regional transportation plan. Can we get a motion to get that on the floor? Have a motion. Do we have a second? And so any discussion on this, we'll turn it to Michael Skipper for an explanation and then him for questions as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Chair, good morning, everyone. Appreciate Daniel covering the TIP amendments for Taylor Lee. Taylor and the rest of our transportation team and much of our research team are in Providence, Rhode Island today as part of the Association of NPO's annual conference. So pretty light in office today. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you and present to you this request for your endorsement of our prioritization framework. I guess before I get into this, a couple of things. One, much of what I'm going to present this morning, I'm going to do it briefly because you've either seen it at a prior Transportation Policy Board meeting, a Transportation Coordinating Committee meeting, or if you participated in one of the 2 rounds of county workshops that we've had so far. A lot of this information is very similar to what you've seen then. What is different is the priority list that we the list of all the projects that you've submitted to us for consideration for federal funding, state funding out to the year 2050. That list continues to evolve in terms of the information that's represented in the list, as well as the rank order of that list against our goals, objectives. It'll continue to shift. So this morning's endorsement isn't in any way locking up funding on any particular project or simply weighing in on where we are with project prioritization process and giving us your endorsement of the approach that we're taking. We will have an updated draft priority list for you in November when we ask you to endorse the first draft of the transportation plan to share with our partners at the state and federal agencies for their compliance review. And then you won't ultimately adopt the plan until March of 2026. At that point, that's when you'll be asked to consider essentially programming that long-term money on the projects that are on the list, at least as far down that list as we can get. So that's what we're here to do this morning, is just really check in with you in terms of our approach before we get paid into the process. Any questions before I get started? Perfect. I will also just point out that the slides are already available online at gnrc.org/slides/TBB. So they're available now if you want to follow along on your tablet. We're also streaming online. Quick look at our plan development progress chart that we share with you each meeting. Right now, we're in this September timeframe. We're asking for your endorsement of our framework for identifying funding priorities. Looking ahead, I just mentioned the November presentation of the first draft of the plan. Before we get to that point, there's a lot of work that we're doing with your local staff as well as consultants. We're continuing to revise the scopes of work for the projects that you're interested in getting funding for. And then we're also working with 2 consulting firms to run cost estimations for the construction of those projects, as well as any right-of-way or utilities relocation needs that might be necessary in order to move those projects forward. We're going to have those cost estimates to share with your local staff near the end of September, getting into October, and then we'll have another round of workshops that I'll talk about in a minute in advance of the November presentation of the final draft. So today's presentation, if it triggers questions in your mind, just write those down and make sure your staff has those questions as they approach those county workshops later this month. And then ultimately looking for plan adoption of March of 2026, following feedback from our state and federal partners. There'll also be a public review and comment period in early 2026. So the approach to prioritizing projects for the limited funding that we have available is really guided by the policy framework that this body endorsed back in I think that was January, March. This board endorsed the policy framework that lays out our guiding principles for sort of guiding the development of a transportation plan, what we're trying to accomplish with it, the regional goals that we're trying to achieve, and primary objectives that we would like to accomplish along the way. I'll remind you of the 6 goals that have been endorsed by the board through that policy framework. These same 6 goals appear in the current transportation plan that was adopted back in 2021, but it's essentially maintaining our transportation network in a state of good repair, maintaining the safety for the traveling public, managing congestion, providing opportunities to grow our economy, minimizing the disruption of building projects, both in terms of making sure that we're not building projects in areas where the community prefers to conserve land, but also as we do construct projects, we're doing so in a way that minimizes the disruption that it might have on the natural environment, our natural resources, and the communities that already exist along those corridors. And then lastly, the goal to make sure that what we're doing as a region is aligning with your local plans, the TDOT's plans, and the national priorities coming out of Washington, D.C. So those are the 6 goal areas. What you're seeing on the screen are their relative weights against each other. This was informed by involvement from you all and the TCC through a series of surveys and conversations. But essentially what this is saying is that if you look at these percentages, roadway safety ultimately ranks as the #1 goal for the region, followed by making sure we're maintaining a state of good repair. And then thirdly, managing congestion, providing economic opportunity. And then the last 2 ranked goals, still important, but relatively speaking, lower weights would be minimizing disruption and aligning with plans. So that is ultimately what we're trying to do, is evaluate each of the projects that have been applied for through our process against those goals, and we're assessing their ability to help us achieve those goals and the corresponding objectives that nest within each of those goals as identified in the policy framework. And this is not new information, but I'll just kind of remind you that for each of these goal areas, we're looking at a tremendous amount of data that relate to the goals. So for example, state of good repair, we're looking to see how your project is scoped to help us maintain the system, but we're also looking at the location of that proposed project in terms of regional significance. Is it on the national highway system? Is it part of the strategic highway network? Is it helping to make sure that those major facilities are kept in the state of good repair? We're also looking to see what the traffic volumes are, particularly freight volumes, to make sure that projects are scoped in a way that are resilient to traffic volumes moving to the future. So that's an example of some of the ways that we're looking to evaluate projects to achieve that goal. Roadway safety, we're looking to see how your project is scoped to improve roadway safety for all users, motorists and non-motorists alike. We're also looking to see where your project is in proximity to known high crash areas, particularly crash areas that lead to serious injuries or fatalities. And if it's in an area that is leading to serious injuries or fatalities for non-motorist users, we're looking to see if your project is addressing those needs through the scoping, ideally through multimodal accommodations, dedicated facilities for non-motorist users, or some thought into the design consideration for how to improve the project to address safety. And then I'm not going to go through each of these 6 goals, but you can see we've taken very data heavy approach to evaluating your projects against these goals, which really ultimately is our responsibility as staff, is to remove the emotion and the politics from what we need to fund and just look at it purely from a merit standpoint. We're going to give you a ranked list that is backed up by that data. Ultimately, though, the Transportation Coordinating Committee led by Josh Sudeth, they'll help make sure that our technical work is sound, and then you all at the Transportation Policy Board will bring your perspectives, which include a political perspective, to make sure that what we ultimately adopt is consistent with where our region wants to head. Slides continue on with a deeper dive into some of the metrics that we're exploring for each of these areas of each of the goals. The data that we source for our evaluation process typically comes from 3 sources of information. The information that you're providing to us through the applications that you submitted to us beginning in early 2025 through even last month. You're continuing to receive information directly from you. This could be just scoping information about the project. It could be prior planning studies or engineering reports that have been completed for the project that help inform on design and aspirations for the project. We're also looking at the conditions and trends of the context for that project. That's where we're looking at sort of what's happening on the ground in the neighborhood or the community around that project in terms of today, also as projected out to the year 2050. So we're looking at growth and development that is expected to occur based on your local plans and our regional forecast for growth to understand the market that the transportation improvement is going to be serving over time. Or also, this is where our traffic model comes into play as we observe and forecast traffic volumes, roadway travel speeds, and other attributes associated with travel behaviors across the region come into play through the conditions and trends indicators that we're looking at. And then the third source of information that goes into the scoring process is the qualitative assessment that our professionals are doing on Daniel's team, where we're looking at the other 2 sources of information using professional judgment to align what you're proposing, how, sort of assess what you're proposing against those goals using the input provided by those other 2 sources of information. All 3 sources of information will ultimately go into the scoring that we use to lead us to a ranked list of priorities for funding across Tennessee. So we have published, we published last week, we had office hours available for the TCC, the preview, the list that is in your packet before today, but it's the second iteration of the project priority. So this list is what is different from the workshops that you participated in throughout July. Is that July? So this is an updated list. There's some additional projects. There's some shuffling of projects. There'll continue to be project shuffling as we learn more information about those projects that you're proposing. I think for today, though, what we would like for you to focus on is our general scheme for prioritizing projects. And we use this last plan update as well. We ultimately were scoring all proposed improvements that have a known physical location. So if you're proposing to improve a section of roadway, it could be for vehicular motorists, or it could be for non-motorists, could be a sidewalk, could be a bicycle lane, could be a roadway reconstruction, ITS. The key here is that we're scoring numerically all projects with known termini on the network. That's important because of all the contextual information that I just said went into the evaluation process. There are other projects that you proposed to us or that we have proposed to staff. They're more programmatic in nature. So roadway safety improvement, funding, or groupings of projects for improving traffic signals across a broad area. Unless you identified specifically those signalized intersections that you want to improve, that's not part of the scoring that we're talking about today. Those will be dealt with through a separate process where we do calls for a project with programmatic grants after we adopt the plan. We've accounted for in the plan how much of the programmatic money we should have over the next 25 years, but the cycles for awarding out that money would be more frequent than the horizon that we're looking at for the full transportation plan itself. So the ranking, this sort of the approach to using the STAR system here applies to those on-road improvements. But again, those could be sidewalk or bicycle improvements or ITS improvements on the roadway network. And just like last time, we are recommending that we identify major, sort of regionally significant projects as our 5-star projects. Right now, I'll show you the list of what's in their current plan, get some feedback from you in a minute. But these are like the consensus headline priority projects. These would be the most newsworthy projects that this region is trying to accomplish. For example, upgrading and modernizing the downtown interstate loop, right? We all kind of recognize that as the elephant in the room when it comes to regional mobility as we're coming in and out of the urban core that needs to be addressed at some point in time. That's an example of what we would consider a 5-star project. It didn't rely on any one of you or TDOT to apply for that project. That's something our staff is bringing to the table just based on our assessment of the regional system. So I'm not really going to talk about the 5-star projects today. I'm going to focus on the 4-star projects and then the 3, 2, and 1-star projects and talk about the distinction here in the ranking system that we use. So if you have a project in the current transportation improvement program, that part of the $2.5 billion that Daniel just presented on in the current TIP, which goes through the federal fiscal year 2026, and there's a state or federal commitment on that project. Doesn't have to be a prior investment, but there's already a commitment from a TDOT revenue stream or a federal grant that either we're managing or that TDOT is managing. We're going to continue to commit to that project unless there's some known fatal flaw that we discover through the evaluation process, which happens very, very rarely. And you're going to know about that typically before you apply for the project. We're going to consider, regardless of the score that project achieves through our scoring process, we're going to consider those 4-star projects because it's really important that we fully commit to the obligations that we've already made to improvements across the region and make sure that they're the top priority, sort of topping off those projects, get them done, get them off the books so we can move on to the more forward-looking improvements that we know our region needs. So if you've got a project in the TIP, state or federal funds, it's going to be considered a 4-star project, would be first in line for funding as we're pulling in our revenue forecasts for the next 25 years. And then we get to what we call the new starts projects. These are projects you may have done some engineering work on it, but there really isn't any substantial commitment from a state or federal funding source yet. It's not identified in the TIP. We're going to consider that a new starts project, even if you have started a little bit of work on it. It's a new starts from our regional perspective. And then that's really where the scoring matters most. The 3-star projects would be those new starts projects scoring that top third. And then, just kind of break the list into thirds based on the score. Right. So the 1-star projects are not unimportant projects. They're just projects that don't do as well through our scoring process as those in the top third. Context matters a lot. Context plus what you're proposing to do to address known deficiencies on the network matter a lot in terms of where your project lands within one of those 3 levels of prioritization: 3 stars, 2 stars, 1 stars. All right. So this was presented as part of this workshop. So this isn't new information either, but I know that not everybody was able to participate in this workshop. So I wanted to go through that one more time before we look at the list together. I'll hit on the 5-star priority projects real quick before we move to the actual project priority list. where the rankings matter. This is a look at what's currently incorporated into our regional transportation plan as our consensus headline priorities. We've got the downtown interstate loop upgrades and modernization. There's a lot of work that needs to happen with Nashville, with the region, with communities around the downtown urban core, with TDOT, with Federal Highway, on what we mean by upgrading and modernizing the loop. But we know that its antiquated design that was implemented in the 50s and 60s is causing us issues now as traffic converges at those major junctions. A lot of weaving movements at those interchanges to access the downtown grid system. And there is some inefficiency with this with respect to the use of land adjacent to the downtown interstate loop that could be addressed as a part of addressing the transportation movements. We would give you a preview. That's going to be part of our recommendations for the new plan, as well as to continue to focus on the need to upgrade that downtown interstate loop. Similarly, we want to make sure the region is focused on the regional corridors, particularly in terms of modernizing them to bring them to state of practice with respect to the incorporation of transportation technologies to manage traffic and travel behaviors, but also to provide options for travelers beyond sitting in congestion in their car. So adding multimodal accommodations in the regional corridors is extremely important to us, according to the adopted transportation plans. And then also 5-star priorities would be those programmatic investments that I mentioned earlier, where we identify pots of money for separate calls for projects to improve roadway safety, to deploy technology, to deploy ADA accommodation upgrades. Those are things that we don't try to itemize over the 25-year period. We just think those things are important. And as you have opportunities to do those things, we would make funding available to you along the way. Any questions about the 5-star projects before we move on? Yes, sir.
Make sure I understand on I-24, to help me understand Southeast Corridor and the interaction there with choice lane. Is that expected to be supplementary as listed?
Yes, sir. So when we adopted the plan, there was no awareness of what would become known as the Choice Lanes program at TDOT through the passage of the Transportation Modernization Act by the General Assembly. But when that act was passed and TDOT began to pursue the Choice Lanes project, they did approach the Transportation Policy Board to amend the plan to incorporate that project. And what we had shared with the board at the time is that it was largely consistent with what we had scoped in the 2045 plan, with the exception that it was adding additional vehicular capacity that we didn't account for in the last transportation plan. Most of the improvements that we had proposed in the adopted plan were about technology, better traffic management, communication, and adding the rapid transit option. So I think we assessed that the choice lanes provide an opportunity to do some of the things that we had proposed, but it is also adding vehicular capacity. So we did amend the plan with the choice lanes project as it is currently scoped. That's subject to change as they negotiate with the developers. But it is consistent, but different in some ways. And I think it's going to be on this body and our staff to continue to negotiate the fine details associated with the choice lanes project to make sure that it is accomplishing the goals that the region sets out for that corridor. And if it doesn't, that we continue to do more above and beyond what the department might be proposing in the form of choice lanes.
What I'm hearing from you is, as prioritized here for the, it's at least include.
That's right. And the plan as amended does incorporate the toll lanes as part of the scope of work.
Or your rail upgrades, says positive train control. Is it?
It does. The long-range plan calls for increased frequencies, which would necessitate positive train control, siting, additional trackage, potentially additional stations or expanded stations over time. The short-term improvements have been largely guided by what Steve and WEGO has been doing through the Star Future.
Yeah, that's both the short and the long term.
I forgot the brand name of the study. Future Vision. But what we do over the long term, what we do over the short and long term are obviously always the parameters are, what's the market demand Where's land use and development going? What are the funding opportunities? Those things change over time. So even though we've done a study, it's important to make sure we always, that's why we're required to update our plan every 5 years, because conditions change, preferences change, funding opportunities change. And so I think that study did a good job of identifying some of the challenges with increasing frequencies and some of the costs associated with removing those barriers. But that study obviously isn't the end game for what we're trying to do along the East Corridor or any of the other corridors that we're pursuing. Any other questions about this list of projects? There could be some additional sort of consensus headline priorities you want us to include on the list next time around, Mayor.
Was there any way, or would this in any way hurt your program where it reads, and I'm on the highlighted red section where it says comma, enhanced mobility for seniors? Could we insert the word veterans after that in individuals with disabilities?
We absolutely can. I mean, I think we're referring specifically to the grant program that Daniel had talked about in the TIP amendments, but from a community objective, absolutely.
There's a whole pot of money out there for veterans, more coming, but if you don't identify it, you're not going to keep that fresh on your mind.
Yes, sir.
Of course, there are a few of us in there that veterans would like to see more emphasis placed as possible.
Absolutely. I think, we haven't talked about this a lot at the Transportation Policy Board meetings, but we're responsible, the MPOs in the mid-state are responsible for developing a coordinated human services transportation plan that it does a couple of things. One, it makes sense of all the different funders that are out there. We think of US DOT and Federal Highway and FTA by extension at these meetings, but there's also the VA, there's Medicaid, Medicare funding that provides transportation services to older adults and those with disabilities or veterans. One of our roles as one of the GNRC's roles in the region is to serve as the area agency on aging disability. So we actually administer a lot of that transportation services funding for the region from different pots of money. And I think it's really important that somebody can look at our transportation plan, which is largely US DOT, and understand the markets that we're trying to improve quality of life for through transportation. So I appreciate that input.
At the end of the day, you think you can insert that word in
You
there?
got it. Yeah. I know you just want it, yes, but for everybody else's benefit, sort of validate that I agree.
Say that, I just asked the mayor of Davidson County how many veterans he had. He said a lot. We have 10,000 in our county, and I know each of the counties have, particularly Montgomery County, they've probably got 30 or 40 or more thousand. And I think it's always important to highlight those men and women when we can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions or comments about this slide? All right, so here we are at what we're calling the second iteration of the rank list. Again, I'll give you an orientation to how to read this quickly, and I'll share with you how to download a copy for yourself beyond what's included in the packet. But the first few columns here are simply just some basic details about the project as you propose to it. And then you see the numerical score, and then you see the ranking on the list. And the ranking is, that ranking is within the full list. Okay, it's important to know that this list is sorted by the tier, which is represented by the stars, and then the score. That's why you can get the number 2 project at the top of the list, right? Because the number 1 project is actually not a 4-star project, it's a 3-star project. And I can tell you that overall, looking at all the projects in the region that were submitted, the top few ranked projects are the Choose How You Move corridors in Davidson County, which are bringing online a lot of multimodal accommodations for fast growing sort of urban parts of the region that connect to other parts of the network to improve regional mobility. But know that you're looking at a list that's sorted first by tier and then by score. And so you're seeing the higher ranked 4-star projects at the top of this list. And then the columns that appear in color there are, it's a visual representation of whether that project score is above average, or below average for each of the 6 goal areas that I mentioned, right?
In relation to the other projects.
It's all relative, right? There's no good or bad. It's just everything relative to each other. We're going to assume that all of this is good. But when you force rank things, you're going to have some things at the top of the list and some things at the bottom of the list. And so for each grouping of each tier, you're going to notice at the top of the list, you're going to see a lot more green than red. That should be intuitive. Kind of blue. This is just a static version of the list, but the list is in your packet. I'll show you how to download it in a minute, but that's how to read this. And if the project's already programmed in the tip, which should be the case for all of these 4-star projects, you'll see the corresponding tip numbers. It gets a little bit complicated because some of the times we will list a project in the regional transportation plan, which is the full scope of the project, the full length. But the way we implement projects is typically through phases. So ultimately, it'll be broken up into multiple projects for the purposes of programming in the tip. So that's why you'll see multiple tip IDs for some of these projects. Any questions about the information that's provided on the handout?
We able to see the math that goes into any given score?
Yeah, we absolutely could share that. And a lot of the data that we're using for the scoring is also accessible to you. One of the software applications that your team has access to.
Into just a little bit more the phasing that you were talking about into the point of cost, right? Like, so when we're seeing here, like the aggregated multi-phase cost of something versus how it might be implemented relative to, you know, the linear miles and that kind of stuff. Is that, I mean, you can only put so much in one single table, but when you go online, can you kind of make those distinctions when you look at the data or?
I should ask about cost, though. That's going to lead me in a couple directions here. The first is this is the cost that you've provided us. So it's not the cost that has come back from the consultants who are doing independent cost estimation. They're doing a pretty thorough estimate of costs. They're looking at your proposed scope. They're benchmarking against cost data from TDOT, just observations of what things have been costing over the last few years. Are really breaking out by component. We have one consultant doing that. We have another consultant looking at right-of-way needs and utility relocations. There's going to be some general assumptions that we make there because we don't know what parcels you're going to need. We're not doing field inspections of power lines, but some good rules of thumb being applied by the consultants. And then each of those consultants, they're overlapping by 10% where they're both doing all aspects of the cost estimation, just for a little bit of benchmarking there. So we haven't provided that number. That's forthcoming late September, early October. And we'll have those consultants present to this body so you can understand a bit more about their methodology. So when they're doing the cost of the full build out, and then they may be subtracting costs incurred or costs spent already for projects that have already moved forward through design engineering or right-of-way acquisition. So we'll deduct those to get to a net cost. That would be the liability that we're trying to address through the transportation plan. We'll break all that out for you in detail. I know CDM Smith, who's doing the construction cost estimates, are also giving us as a deliverable the cost estimation worksheets that we can provide back to the local agencies, so you can see all the assumptions that were made in the cost estimation. The other thing is that's where this gets a little bit messy, is the projects in the short term. In some cases, we're combining some of the phases that we've identified back into a single project, and so we're kind of all over the place at this stage in terms of, like, it's not all apples to apples quite yet. It will be by the time we get to the March endorsement, but it's still a lot of details to wade through in terms of, like, where exactly are we with that project and where are we headed. And then ultimately the cost estimates that go into the plan are going to be inflated to the year we think the project's going to be built. And so if you sum up the total costs of all the projects that have been submitted to us, we're looking at about $14 billion worth of needs. And that doesn't even include those 5-star priority projects, which are by themselves probably $15 billion worth of projects. I know TDOT's going around talking about 30 billion statewide. We got 30 billion right here, right now, not inflated per year of expenditure estimates. I'm not sure I answered your question, Mayor.
That's what I was getting at.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Yes, that does answer. Thank you.
That is good clarification about the cost that's being shown. Actually, we're not showing it here, but it's on the interactive database. I don't see cost on this spreadsheet. So that leads me to where you could find this interactive database, which is really important, like your team, your staff, your consultants. We need eyes on the project lists, making sure termini are correct, cross sections are correct. And that's largely what we've been focused on, our team and your team over the last couple of months. And there's still a little bit more work to do. Let's see. I'm gonna finish the slides and I'm gonna hop into the databases. I think that'd just be easier. So where we're headed from here is we have scheduled the third round of the county level workshops. These workshops, sometimes some of you mayors have participated in these workshops and we really appreciate it. We do tend to go into the weeds. So your participation is really important, but getting your engineer and your planner, whether in-house or consultants on these calls, is really important. But for round 3, we'll be reviewing like the final assumptions about the project details. We'll be beginning to look at cost estimates. I don't know if we'll have all the estimates done by the time we have these workshops, but that information, we'll have plenty of time in October to dig into those. And we'll continue to answer questions, including opening the hood a little bit more on the math behind the projects for round 3. These are the dates of the round 3 workshops. Matthew up in Providence has been coordinating with your staff to book these dates. There are a couple of cases where 2 counties are going to be doing a joint meeting where it kind of makes sense for Murray and Williamson to have that joint meeting. Similarly, Roberts and Sumner, a lot of transportation improvements on the those county lines. So Roberts and Sumner will be together Wednesday. All these are next week for the most part. There's a couple, Rutherford and Davidson, that will spill over to the following week. Make sure these are on your radar. I think these are going to be largely virtual online meetings. Calendar invites, have they gone out?
They have.
Okay. So if you don't have your county's meeting on your calendar, just let us know. We'll add you to the calendar. Okay, so this is the requested actions to endorse that framework. Make sure like we're getting good feedback from you that we're on the right track as we begin to land the plane on the runway in front of us with respect to the plan update. I'm going to hop over real quick to the software. The most important database for you to be aware of, and from here you can get to the other resources that are available, is at gnrc.org/app/2050 RTP. This is essentially a list of all the projects that are being considered for funding through the year 2050. Here you can see the total cost information, Vice Mayor. And then you can click into any of these projects to see more information. You could also click into this last column relates, the second to last column is the Apply app. So this is the system that you use to apply for the project. So this will contain the information that you provided to us, as well as the data that we're using to score the projects are available at the Apply app link. You do need login credentials for that. So if you run into any issues, you can just reach out. But somebody in your jurisdiction has the ability to get logged in. We've also talked previously about how you can create an account. You can have your own dashboard and track your own projects. Not necessary to use this system. Fresh. But the handout that we just went through is available for download. This button right here, this draft priority list button, will give you the full list of ranked priorities. And again, these are on-road improvements only, not the programmatic investments into bridges and safety improvements and enhanced mobility for seniors and those with disabilities and veterans that we just talked about. Any questions about this? So again, this is headquarters for everything related to RTP projects and links out to the online map, Esri map with all the projects. The online software that you use to apply for the projects, as well as the downloadable priority list. Mr. Chair, that's the information we have this morning. Of course, we'll be available to answer any additional questions that the board has, but I'll turn it back over to you for
All right.
action.
Thank you. We placed this on the floor with a motion and a second. Any other discussion before we vote to endorse this plan? Framework, Roger?
I just have one question for Michael. As I'm sitting here and thinking about what's happened in our communities, particularly from catastrophic floods up in the upper East Tennessee, over in a neighboring county that all of us know nearby. How come we don't put some kind of funding model in place to help all of our cities and counties in the chance that something happened like happened here in 2010. A few of us still remember how devastating that was. We all struggled trying to make that, watching TDOT struggle to make those improvements up in the upper East Tennessee. Recently, I was doing some trout fishing and couldn't even enjoy trout fishing because of the conditions up there. Many of those communities will never be able to come back without many, many years. Is there any reason that MPOs across the state don't put contingency funding in budget to help communities out during that? Other than maybe Metro and a few others, most of us don't have that kind of money laying around.
Yeah, it's a good question. We do look at.
I doesn't have it either.
Now, looking at the resiliency of the infrastructure is part of our planning process. So we know which roadways are in harm's way if there was a flooding event. Flooding is easier to predict than, say, a windstorm. So we are assessing the resiliency of our infrastructure, and we're trying to encourage that as these projects get engineered and built, they're built to withstand flooding or other natural disasters. But when it comes to money to repair things that are damaged from a storm, I mean, it's very difficult to program federal formula funds for that because of the pressure to obligate those dollars right away. So typically, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the right policy, but typically we rely on those supplemental disaster relief funds to help get us out of the bind caused by a natural disaster. So we try to engineer and design projects in a way that are more resilient. We try not to put infrastructure in harm's way in the first place. But in terms of the recovery and the reconstruction from damage, it's just difficult to program the federal US DOT dollars for that purpose. TDOT, maybe you can
I know
speak.
you give me a long answer. I just don't like it.
Well, I don't know how you program $1 billion that for an event that might happen in 5 years.
Thank you. Good question. I think the best way to look at it is that the funds that you have available that you are putting in your plan, some of those funds are available for resiliency investments. So really, as Michael's kind of stating, if there are known areas where you're either flood prone or that you've encountered in the past, you could have that as a priority. You could make investments in that. There are some discretionary funds now. That some of the grants at the moment are a little bit in flux, but specifically there's one called Protect, the discretionary grant. So if you do have projects that are specifically related to trying to address those types of resiliency issues, absolutely having them in your plan, maybe even having them as an illustrative project, positions you well to once you want to seek those funds.
Yeah, and that's something that happens now. And we as a matter of just a role that we play in the region are routinely helping local communities apply for things like the the Protect Grant is not available right now, to be clear, but there's EDA funds for disaster recovery that we're helping communities go after. And if you've got infrastructure that has been damaged, so we're talking about something that's already happened, that certainly could be funded through the plan. But instead of setting money for a future disaster with US DOT funds, it's difficult.
A lot deeper, and I'm very simple.
Yeah, Mayor, I think to answer your question, I'm assuming in the category of state of good repair, that would be something that would fall in that eligibility component.
Maybe try your question again, because we're overthinking it, yeah.
So many of our roads and bridges are more than what we currently are doing under sustainability. Any of those roads and bridges wouldn't even be built today. And we need to face that. And when floods or natural disaster comes along, Mother Nature is upset with us. I don't know where they are, where they're going to occur. Now, many times we can help through planning, not allow planning to occur on riverbanks, floodways, and all of it. All of that you're saying is true, but over the years, we've allowed that to allow low-cost housing to go in around those riverbanks, and they're the very people that are affected. The trailers are uprooted and float down the waters. And we all knew it going in. my question is, why can't we? If it's a regulation, then we have people in Nashville, we have people in Washington. We need to work on that and put some funds back so that communities like Cobb County, Newport, Tennessee, up in that area, they're devastated. And you go over to next county over, had a big flood, wiped out the whole. These communities are still trying to recover from things. And that's just not right. It seems to me that we can't help out our cities and counties. I don't care what political side you're on. Surely we could get something like that in Washington or Nashville that allows us to put some money in so that when these events happen, we can come to our MPOs knowing we get a little help there. Now it's just county to county, and I'm making my pitch. I don't want to get into your lane, but
It's probably.
I don't like
FEMA's expected to come in. FEMA's expected.
FEMA doesn't help us.
You know, I talked to the mayor Waverly down there. Remember Jesse was here on the board? And you, mayor, still got a stack of FEMA papers that tall. Those people hadn't got any help yet.
I think there's a couple things we can do, Mayor, on this. One is we can make more clear what these grant funding opportunities are. Like almost every day, we're helping a community apply CDBG funds to a recovery project or apply for supplemental disaster funding made available through the US EDA or some other federal agency. But those are pots of money that are reactionary, right? That something happens, the federal government makes a pot of money available. Sometimes it's competitive and we have to help a community apply for it. I think what you're saying is, why not build in from the formula funding from USDOT, why not build in a contingency pot of money that's already available? We don't have to make application and wait 2 years to see if it's going to come to fruition to invest in the project. And I would say the only challenge, we're happy to explore that as staff and work with the department. The only challenge will be is to overcome the pressure to get money obligated as soon as possible.
And we need to figure out a way to get that done, Mike.
Absolutely.
Because when you have, I'll give you an example of the 2010 flood. The biggest headache we had, where do you take all of the insulation and the trash? You can't take it to your landfill because you're going to get this organization called TDEC all over your back. They will be breathing down your back to get rid of all of this contaminated stuff because of a flood. Davidson County I remember having this conversation with the mayor. You've got a county highway department. Counties don't have public public works. Is that what y'all call it in the city? Somebody else. Counties don't have those. We have a highway department that can't even get out into the creek to pull up the dead cow. This bridge that's stopped up the bridge underneath it. We can't do that. We have to stay within a certain right of way. And those are all things you can't help. But if we've got funding, we can hire somebody to go and do that. Now, most of us in county government just broke the law. We said, send them down there and let's get that cow stuck. Let's get it out of there. But I look at this organization to be able to help us in times of needs, time of a need. And maybe I'm the only one in here feels that way, but I really think what we've seen up in East Tennessee, I applaud TDOT for really, really getting in there, but they can only do so much. They've only got so many dollars.
Well, I see it the same way. It's our job to help our communities out. And like I said, I think the way we've traditionally done is to help you apply for those reactionary dollars. We'll work with the department to figure out eligibilities with the STVG funds, which is what we had the most responsibility for, is the Federal Highway STVG funds, to look at eligibilities for a set aside for disaster recovery. In a similar way, we do set asides for JARC or safety or active transportation. So we can look into that, Mayor. It'll mean the trade-off, obviously, is that we're going to set aside that money and won't be able to commit it to the list of projects that we just talked about. But if that's the policy priority of the region, then that's something we're happy to do.
Any other questions for Michael? Discussion? All right, we have a motion and a second. Looking for a vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Next up is our informational items, the I-24 choice lane. Is Rebecca here? Hey, come on up, share with us.
Oh, no, I'm Sarah here. And well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Rebecca Hammonds. I'm the TDOT P3 Communications Officer. We just want to make sure to inform this group of our upcoming public informational meetings. I know I've come to this group multiple times about choice lanes. You've heard from me in various different ways. The information is largely the same, but these informational meetings are going to be very similar to what we've done in the past. So we had a round of meetings last summer. They are open house style. They will continue to be open house style. This is not going to be a formal presentation or a formal hearing. This is a very informal open house informational meeting for folks to come in during the course of 2 hours, gather the information they are looking for, ask the questions they want answers to, and then come and go as they please. There will also be a virtual meeting that will be on our website. It's loosely a meeting. It's a website that you can view all of the information about the project that we're taking to the public. I do want to just say disclaimer, we are still in the very early stages of this project. We are still working through our environmental analysis of the proposed Choice Lanes project. What we brought to the public last year were two alternatives, essentially two conceptual designs. We in this round of public meetings, we'll be bringing one refined conceptual design with some additional environmental analysis. You'll see some of the information in that environmental analysis is going to include the consideration of heavy commercial vehicles. So semi-trucks, the partners on the road we all know and love. It will include, just like I said, the consideration and analysis of adding or allowing heavy commercial vehicles into the choice lanes. So that is my song and dance, honestly. All the information is provided here on your flyer. But at that point, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is this PDF on your website? We can download the PDF.
All of the information is on the website. I will be happy to, actually, Skipper has this PDF. So
It's available now on the online packet.
yeah, so on the online packet, the agenda in this calendar invitation, it should be there. You can get it right now. I'm happy to send it to you if that would be easier.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Are there environmental documents available for review comment in advance of the
So
meeting?
no formal environmental documents. We're still working through the actual environmental assessment, but there will be a good amount of environmental information. So things like discussion about the noise analysis, the visual, we're going to have a visual impact workshop people can sign up for, purpose and needs statement. So we're going to have a number of actual environmental elements that will be included in that document available for review and comment.
Question?
And Mr. Chair, I was going to staying in the topic of choice lanes, but moving corridors. I think the chair is going to reference the meeting that we have with the commissioner and the TDOT leadership team a week or so ago. But at that meeting, you had made reference to planning an environmental linkages study for the South Quarter. I assume to be kind of getting ahead of the game a little bit and what might be next.
Correct. Yeah. So, I like the 5-star. I sort of felt like, Michelin, be delivering something here and it's top of the menu. But this is a great example of the conversation you all had around the long range plan where something comes from the plan itself and then becomes a project and works through the process of analysis and clarity and understanding cost and so forth. So we'll be coming back with more details on this, but relative to what Michael is asking, we are employing a new practice as it relates to our larger projects called Planning Environmental Linkage, PEL. So most of you, the easiest way for me to describe this is most of you commonly have seen in the past where we might do a corridor study. And that study will analyze a variety of things and come up with some recommendations, and it sits on a shelf. And then when dollars become available or interest grows enough, that then moves into become part of the TIP and the programming part for the environmental component and the engineering. Much like our department has changed in terms of taking a team-based approach to project delivery, which has allowed us to go from 50% delivery to 100% delivery on our projects in the 10-year plan. This is very similar. What we're doing is starting the conversation in and around a corridor with planning and environmental, much like what Rebecca is referring to on the I-24. The I-24 is a little bit different in the context of when we started with that, our friends at FHWA basically said, we think that you have a project. It's in the plan. We had to amend the plan for the clarity, but that is on its environmental document, the environmental assessment and EA. The planning environmental linkage, essentially what that lets us do is define purpose and need. It allows us to have certain touch points with our federal partners and state partners so that when the clarity of what specific improvements are part of that, then you can quickly move into either an approved environmental document or quickly move it into the planning for the right-of-way and construction. And that's what you're seeing on I-24, a much more progressive. You said the plan was adopted in 2020, 2021. Here you are looking at a $2+ billion investment from something that's in your plan from 2021. Now, it's taken a long time to get to that because I know there's been lots of studies and analysis, but you can quickly see how the planning and environmental linkage can work. And so I-65, to answer your question, I-65, which is one of yours here, and the inner loop, we are gearing up for that, but we need to come back to your staff and have the conversation because we want to make sure when we come to you, you're getting one message on these large project investments. And Michael mentioned a lot of the data and assumptions. We want to make sure we're hand in hand with you on that.
So the I-65 study area for the flooding environmental linkages initiative will likely be Davidson, Williamson, Murray County.
Correct. We have, when we first started to look at choice lanes and major investments on the interstate system in Middle Tennessee, the question is, where do you start? Because they're all interconnected with one another. So what we have done is we've essentially have defined the inner loop, which kind of gives us some spurs out 40 towards the airport, making sure that we connect back in on 24, a little bit to the north, I think to 24, if I'm not mistaken, and then some fingers down as they go out towards 440. But in essence, Davidson County for 65, Old Williamson, and to Bear Creek, in Murray. So Murray, yeah. So does that help? Okay.
Just I guess be on the lookout for more information about how to get
Absolutely.
engaged.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Question.
Oh, yes, of course, happy.
For the heavy commercial vehicles in the choice lanes, and so is there a proposal in that regard to be shared with the public for them to comment on? And I guess my question is heavy commercial vehicles. I'm wondering, has the commitment by TDOT to allow public transit in choice lanes been formalized in any regard, or is that still open for discussion as far as our?
It is not open for discussion. It's a thing, I mean, it is a commitment that we have made. You know, we've talked with Steve many times, this commitment we've made to the city and to the MTA to make sure, I mean, that is a commitment that will not change. So heavy commercial vehicles and the addition of them does not change that at all. When you say a proposal, there won't be a formal proposal for the public to react or respond to. Really, we're asking them to comment on the conceptual design, which includes the consideration of those heavy commercial vehicles. So, you know, all of the information will be there for them they will be able to respond to the information about those semis and the ability to use choice lanes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And when we say heavy commercial vehicles, I think, was it class 10?
So
It reaches up to the FHWA class 10.
So it's going to be based on number of axles.
Yes, sir. Yeah. A lot of it is considerations about even just the wear and tear on the lanes themselves and the weight, the size, so that the axles and the classification is important. Yeah, of course.
It's Atlanta, out of curiosity.
I'm sorry, say
What
what?
does Atlanta do out of curiosity on the heavy commercial?
They allow it.
So I'm not sure about the Atlanta one, but there are many states that do allow them. But there's a pricing component that comes to it. If you've seen it, probably, I think the best example was maybe in Virginia. Typically, their price will be, it could range anywhere from 2 to 3 times the passenger pay. Yeah, because obviously during peak hours, you're trying to move more of your commuter transportation movements. And so I think that also, I think, addresses your question about transit, because we're most interested in moving traffic that will be using it during that peak time.
Really, the consideration overall from TDOT is we know that no matter what, the freight traffic is going to be on that corridor. And quite frankly, even beyond 24, that freight traffic is moving through that inner and outer loop no matter what. So we've even with Preston's team, we're working to change this year's freight management plan to make sure it includes the conversation of freight being able to utilize choice lanes and kind of getting them out of the way of general purpose traffic, to be honest.
Good questions. Thank you. Next up is the TDOT report. Preston, you handle that.
Right into it now. Love it. Well, some of you had an opportunity to share a little bit of the highlights. I just wanted to talk about the statewide partnership program. I think most of you know that the window closed at the end of August. And we don't have any great stats to give you at the moment. We're still working through that process. But the goal is between now and the release of our 10-year plan, which will be in April, is to have conversations and then ultimately selection of what we can include in the 10-year plan for SPP. Just to kind of give you a quick run, our first year doing it in 23, we had roughly about 66 projects that were submitted. In 24, we had 76 projects, pretty close. Today, from this most recent one, 60 projects submitted. By far, the greatest interest and need in terms of partnering is in what we'll call Region 3, because I've kind of had a group that way. I don't have it by MPO. So basically, around 31 projects were submitted. So we will be looking, as I mentioned, over this coming months. Last year, we selected 9 projects for the statewide partnership program. The first year was 6. Seeing great interest, great success. Last year, we had over $200 million in local commitment. When I say local, that could include MPO funding and/or of other funds that you may have available. Could be a discretionary grant that you've been successful at achieving. Last year, we had over $200 million of those dollars brought to our program that helped move $900 million of transportation investment statewide. And so that's just a kind of a quick update on that. And you heard about our choice lanes and public meetings. And any questions you may have of the department, I'm more than happy to answer.
Anybody have anything for Preston today? We appreciate you. Thank you.
I do have a question. Some time ago, we committed some of our dollars that had been spent to TDOT so you could pull down more federal funds. Can you give us a report on the success of that?
Success. So last, not this current fiscal year, but last fiscal year, I think we had our largest August redistribution ask, and it was over 300 million. I don't have the exact numbers, but we have I can get that for you, but I know we have a system set up to work with the staff in getting those dollars brought back to you for repayment. I think you provided us around 70 million is my recollection, if that sounds right on the STBG. Do you recall the amount, Michael, or
No, I
not?
think it was 70 to 90 is my recollection, something of that
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
But I know we were lowest as far as all the states, or almost the lowest. And so I was hoping to get a report that maybe we had moved up the ranking and we're pulling in more money, because that money is the issue.
Right.
we have.
Yeah. So it's the reverse flip is we have the highest unobligated balance in the country as it comes to urban STBG funds. That we're still, I don't know about, haven't looked at a ranking. That's not a good thing in terms of being on the list on that. But there have been a number of challenges, and some of which are on the department's part. And as I've mentioned to you and other mayors, that we're building up our local programs division so that we can help on the projects that you have to move them as more expeditiously. For the first time, we now will have 10 engineers in that division that will be able to converse with your engineers and the technical staff that you have available at the local level. Our goal is to help you move your projects, because if you're moving your projects, you're obligating your funds.
Well, and just a point of clarity, like what we get through the August redistribution isn't more cash per se. It's more authority to spend the cash that's already been allocated to us. But there is an indirect benefit in that the more we get our money obligated, the more competitive we're going to be for discretionary funding that is not given to us by way of formula, but through.
Yeah, there's a kind of a force multiplier. The same year that we were successful, and again, greatly appreciate the partnership on us borrowing your obligational authority to obligate additional funds. That's the same year that we received almost 300 million for the Mississippi River crossing for that discretionary grant. So exactly what Michael's referring to. We were able to advance, I know, in this region, 3 resurfacing projects that we would have normally had to wait till the next fiscal year. So if that helps explain that, it just gives us access to those dollars sooner because other states weren't successful in obligating their balances.
And my last question has to do with the statewide partnership program. And I'm just kind of curious of the 3 cycles that you've seen and one you haven't finished yet. How many of those projects are being submitted every single time?
You're saying resubmitted?
Resubmitted.
Yeah, that is a good question. We will look at that. I don't think we've looked at that in the past. I will say that I know from the first cycle to the second, there were a good number, and those that were really close in that first cycle got funded in the second. It is a lot different than your criteria that you have in your long range plan, because what we're looking at is the deliverability component to it. Is it ready to be let to construction? I know that there was a project in Region 3 where there was a great project submitted and they were bringing dollars to it, but unfortunately, the environmental, we knew that we had to do an archaeological and we couldn't commit to expediting. So we're looking at that level of detail so that when we put these dollars on your project, it is to move the project.
That would be a great point on that list to probably put a notation on each one of those projects that says it's been submitted 2 times, 3
Yeah,
times.
we can, and I think we provided the list back to the MPO staff. I think we, if I'm not mistaken, but we are trying to improve the process because our goal is to help, if you're committing local dollars or MPO dollars, we want to help you deliver. We want to help those projects get to delivery.
I think we're all interested in a little more clarity on what it takes to get an award, statewide partnership.
Yeah.
And you added just a little bit of clarity then. So thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we do appreciate Preston for that. Next up, a quick report from TCC, and I'm going to ask Josh to give that. Also, I'm asking Josh to kind of share about some next steps for him as well, if he would. Most everybody, if they don't know, he'll tell us.
Just real briefly, we had a TCC meeting on September the 3rd. It's pretty quick meeting going over a lot of the stuff we talked about today, tip amendments and that kind of thing. RTP updates. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think this process from the staff perspective, going through the RTP update, this is without question the most in-depth analytical process that I've been through. And I've been working with MPO since the time I was with TDOT, a decade ago. And just been through several of these cycles. So I commend Michael and his staff. He's put together a really great team who they're listening to what we have to say. They're paying attention. Used to just be, if y'all remember, you get your projects to them and get it off the list, that kind of a feeling. Nowadays, if something's wrong and what you've submitted or not quite right, they're going to be asking you about it. If you've got to turn something in, they're going to be asking you about it. So there's a lot of analysis that's going on at the MPO level that's really, really great. So I appreciate everything that you guys do. On the personal note that Mayor Couse was talking about, I have accepted a position with the University of Tennessee as their executive director for the Center for Local Planning. Sir, thank you. I'll be starting October 13th. Will be my first day. I think talking to Dr. Bird over at UT,
probably the first order of business is going to be working closely and listening to the development districts. I think there's a lot of discussion out amongst the state about what the role of this new office is going to be with relation to those development districts. So I would anticipate that right out of the gate, I'll be doing a lot of meetings, a lot of calls, a lot of talking with development districts and their executive boards and those kinds of things to hear what their take is on the needs out across the state. I think there's a consensus that there's with the loss of the state planning office years ago, there's a need for some additional coordination, maybe at the statewide level and that kind of thing, and a niche that this office can fill. I'm extremely excited about it. I'm very sad to be leaving Mayor Isbell at Sumter County, but I'm very, 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 very excited about this opportunity and continue to work with all you guys, and I look forward to it.
Congratulations, and it's a great pick for our state. And don't forget, we're your favorite. So, call.
I won't let him.
Thank you for that. Quickly, just from the chairs, we did have that mayor's caucus. I'm going to turn that over to Mayor Moore. Just share from that meeting and just thank you and that opportunity to go down there with Commissioner Reed as well. So.
Well, I do appreciate that opportunity to say a few words, and we must have had, 20 mayors roughly just running through my brain, and had the opportunity to sit down with Commissioner Reed. Commissioner Reed was able to share some of his vision as far as how he's going to continue to lead TDOT. I think the thing that sticks in my mind is that he showed a slide that showed that there was $38 billion worth of need. Unfortunately, after the $38 billion, there was a large plus. And that large plus was explained that he thinks it may be even double the $38 billion of needs that we have. And then the next picture was 1.3 billion available. So we did have a pretty interesting discussion about funding that's needed in the future. Commissioner Reed assured us that however much money the General Assembly and the feds would give him, they had plenty of projects to fund. So I thought it was a cordial meeting, a good opportunity for us to interact with the commissioner, and we look forward to more opportunities. And we also expressed our support of any legislative initiatives that he may want us to look at as the mayor's caucus, and be supportive as we have in the past on the Improve Act and Transportation Modernization Act also.
Thank you for that, Mayor. So it was a good time. We appreciate those who could be there. One thing, just want to share with you. So we are relaunching the task force. So the delay in that's all on me, no one else. Jim Kerr is going to be heading that up. We're going to be getting some things going out. You're going to be getting some meeting invites. We'd already reached out to some people about who's going to be serving on that. One of the questions we did bring up in the mayor's caucus was about local programs. Appreciative of Steve Allen from TDOT being appointed there to oversee that, and appreciate their commitment to try to figure out how to get this working. But it's going to require a lot of work, and Jim has been heavily involved, so he's going to do a great job overseeing some of these things. We're going to get some invites out, get this going. They took a lot of your input already. They've been implementing that. And so the more input that you can give, the more changes that's going to get made, because we need it to be a seamless process and just speed it up. So appreciate Jim being willing to be a part of that. Other than that, staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll start with a quick look at the TIP status report that's in your packet. Daniel.
So this looks not too much of a difference. With the numbers have advanced a little bit since last time you've seen this. But as far as our difference between the elapsed time, we have 77% of our effective TIP period elapsed. And we are 66% through our FHWA funds obligated. Obviously, we want to continue to work to close that gap. We're hoping that with the end of the federal fiscal year, we have several larger line item obligations, hopefully going through to help that. I would remind everybody, this is a great benchmarking, this is a kind of goal setting for ourselves, but it's also a really great reminder to have have you, your team, your staff look, if you look in starting in page 49 and through to page 51, there's actually a list of all the local programs obligations. Great to have extra eyes on that. If there's something missing in there, something you think should have been obligated in the past fiscal year, have your staff reach out. That's part of our job to go after that.
Thank you, Daniel. And I'll also draw your eye to page 4 of the report itself, which is page 52 of our printed packet. There's a grant opportunity on this list that might address some concerns of some of our rural partners. It feels like almost every single day, a smaller town or rural community is reaching out to us for assistance with basic maintenance and resurfacing projects. And we do our best to shepherd them in the right direction, but it's a very difficult thing. There just isn't like a pot of money sitting out there to help local communities for resurfacing. GNRC is looking into this rural and tribal assistance pilot program that we might apply for as a region to bring resources to those rural communities for ongoing state of good repair maintenance. Our approach would be very similar to one of the things I was going to talk about on this next slide here, which is the Regional Roadway Safety Improvement Program. You'll recall we applied for about $10 million of Safe Streets for All grant funds going on maybe 2 years ago now. We were awarded about $6 million at the time. I think it was the second or the largest or second largest award in the country. So we're really proud of the $6 million. And what we're going to use that money for is largely to deploy safety countermeasures across the region on your behalf. So we would take care of all the procurement, getting the engineers on board to design and engineer, get us through NEPA, hire the contractors, deploy the safety measures. Your role would be to help cost share. We would use the grant to pay for up to 70% of the cost of deployment. And then it's otherwise to help us identify where those needs are across the region and where you would like us to come into your community and knock these out. These are not anything that's going to increase vehicular capacity of the roadway network. This is things are like things like lighting, striping, speed cushions, traffic calming solutions, things of that nature that, we watch the news too. We see people in neighborhoods talking about the need to slow traffic down through their community. And this would be money to help you address those needs quicker. But it's also a pilot for us to demonstrate that GNRC could play that intermediary role between the state government and local governments to deploy transportation improvements in a more streamlined, quicker way than the capacity that you may have in-house or the interest that the state would have in doing those types of projects. And this is very much aligned with the Project Delivery Task Force recommendations and its last iteration that was led by Mayor Reed. So that's the first thing I wanted to make mention of, is that we have completed a draft agreement with US DOT. This is a direct grant from the federal government, doesn't flow through TDOT. We're waiting on the contract to come back signed and executed, however.
So the implementation is 70%, not 80%?
It's 80-20 money, but it's a reduced federal share to help match the program funds that are paying for our administration, like hiring the engineers and all that other stuff. So there's a slightly reduced federal share to match. Otherwise, we'd have to pull the match out of regional dues, which would mean we would have to increase regional dues for everybody. Yeah, exactly. So that's the first thing one of the new programs I wanted to mention. We are still waiting on the executed agreement with US DOT, but stay tuned because we'll be on the clock as soon as we get that, and we want to get out there and start making improvements across the region. The other relates to an email that we sent out right before this meeting. There's an opportunity, if you miss it, no big deal, but there's an opportunity next week for you to get onboarded into the signal analytics platform that we have acquired on behalf of local governments across the 14 counties that we serve. That's GNRC's 13 statutory counties plus Murray County, which participates in the NPO program. We're going to use it as staff for our own purposes. We can use it on your behalf, so you can reach out to us. We can analyze that data for you, but also you can just have direct access to the platform for whatever you need it for. So this is traffic information for more than 1,400 signalized intersections across those 14 counties. Read that email. The first step is getting registered for the training that we'll have next week. The other thing is to sign that data use agreement, just one per jurisdiction. And then the email address with a list of users by email address that you want to have access. if you need help getting all that done, just reach out to us. And if you miss next week, it's not going to go anywhere. So just reach out, but I wanted to make sure that you didn't miss the opportunity. NRIC's very exciting, Regional Safety Improvement Program, very exciting. And then lastly, we are looking into that Rural and Tribal Assistance Pilot Program, where we might be able to do something similar to improve roadway service conditions across the region.
That RTA pilot program, what's the population threshold to be considered?
You know, Daniel,
I'm trying to remember. I want to say it was 50,000.
yeah, so the vast majority of communities in the GNRC footprint could benefit from that. And what we're looking to do is do a regional application to bundle the needs together instead of having each individual local town or community apply for that.
And then the other question on that way you look at that is how does that work in between cooperation of county and city government who in those things and those funds, even though it could be a road that's under county authority, but in a rural city, would those funds be able to do that? I know we got county mayors in here that would love to be able to have more money to pave those roads in those cities that the cities don't have funds to do. And would that work? That'd be a good
Absolutely.
question.
Yeah. And Eddie, Eddie's not here with us today, but he represents the county highway officials across Middle Tennessee, across the MPO footprint on this policy board. He's the Williamson County Highway Superintendent. And I think this could be a real benefit. And often these county highway departments don't reach eligibility for a lot of funds that flow through an MPO. This might be a good exception to that to help them out with roadway conditions. Lastly, just to look at the upcoming meetings, we're going to talk a little bit about the signal analytics data at the IT Directors Roundtable that's upcoming. So I think many of you have done just a fabulous job encouraging your CIO, your IT director to attend those meetings, which are facilitated by Pete Westerholm and our staff. Even before that,
Problem is that you keep cutting people off and I'm
our environmental roundtables next week. If you're interested in the recently passed Farmland Preservation Act, we're going to have some information from the Land Trust and the Department of Ag on the implications of that legislation for us. Otherwise, we'll see Josh October 1st for your outgoing meeting as chair, and then the regional council body will convene in this room on October 15th. And then our public transportation roundtable on October 28th. Lastly, I would just want to say thank you to Mayor Anderson for the direction. That's exactly the role of the Transportation Policy Board. So we've noted a couple of things that we'll incorporate into the regional transportation plan. I want you all to know, when we talk about MPO funds, it's not our money. We have the responsibility of shepherding to those dollars according to your priorities within the parameters set by the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration, which define the eligibility. So a lot of our job is to try to figure out how to thread the needle, yeah, that's right. Good analogy. To align with what you want within the requirements that are given to us by the federal government. So I appreciate that feedback today, Mayor, and we'll look for the similar feedback from the rest of you at future meetings and in between meetings. So, Mr. Chair, that is the staff.
Thank you. Any other business before we adjourn? All right, looking for a motion, I guess.
Yeah.
Motion second, all in favor, say let's go. We're out of here.